In a bathtub, John wakes up and realizes he has amnesia. He looks at himself in the mirror and notices a wound on his forehead. After putting on the clothes he finds nearby, he looks around the room for clues. John discovers some keys in a briefcase with the initials KH. Inside, there are more clothes and a postcard from Shell Beach, which triggers memories of visiting that place as a child. Suddenly, a telephone begins ringing, and John picks it up. It's Dr. Daniel, who explains that John's memory was erased due to a failed experiment, and now there are some men looking for him, so he needs to leave immediately. John wants to know more, but he hangs up when he sees something behind the bed. He approaches and is horrified to find a dead woman with bleeding scars shaped like spirals. There's also a blood-stained knife on the table. He immediately runs out of the room and discovers he's in a hotel. The elevator stops and reveals a group of pale, creepy beings known as the Strangers, so John runs downstairs. When he reaches the lobby, John notices every person is asleep, even the receptionist and the woman on the phone. She falls when he opens the door, as if she were dead. Suddenly, the clock strikes 12, and everyone wakes up, not realizing they were asleep at all. The receptionist calls John by his name and mentions he paid for 3 weeks, so he'll need more money if he plans to stay longer. After quickly checking the reservation book to learn his own name and address, John leaves the hotel without paying and throws the suitcase in the river. As he walks through the streets, he notices his fingertips have spirals on them in the hotel. The receptionist goes to John's room to empty it and is pushed against the wall by the Strangers, who have found a mysterious syringe on the ground. They ask about John, and when the receptionist states he left, they touch his face to put him to sleep. Meanwhile, Emma is working as a singer at a bar. After her performance, a co-worker tells her a guy left a card for her stating he was her husband's doctor. Emma follows the address and meets Daniel, who is experimenting with a rat in a maze. Emma is John's wife, and she hasn't seen him in 3 weeks after a serious fight. Daniel says John is undergoing a psychotic break and has complete memory loss, so he may be delusional and even violent. He believes John will contact Emma soon and wants her to call him as soon as that happens. Soon after, Inspector Frank and a few cops arrive at the hotel to investigate the murder. This is the 6th worker with spiral scars found dead in the last month, and now John is the main suspect. Detective Eddie tries to join the investigation, but the cops quickly kick him out because he keeps talking about some strange beings watching them, so they think he's crazy. Later, at the police station, Frank receives the fingerprint results and notices they are spirals. At that moment, Emma arrives to report her husband is missing, and Frank has to inform her that John may be a killer returning to John. He enters a restaurant that looks familiar, and the server immediately recognizes him because he forgot his wallet a few days ago. The server puts the wallet behind one of the many food windows, but John doesn't know how to operate them. At that moment, 2 officers enter, and John becomes so desperate that he activates some kind of mental power that breaks the window open. After taking his wallet, he attempts to leave the restaurant, but he's stopped by the cops. As they ask questions, a woman named May comes in and says he's with her, so the cops let them go. May takes John to her apartment, and while she changes, he checks the wallet and discovers Emma's picture. He then realizes May is a worker, but before he can act, he notices she has a daughter and decides to leave. As he wanders around, he sees a sign promoting Shell Beach, which matches his postcard. He takes a closer look while checking his pockets and finds all the newspaper articles detailing the murders. John falls into shock as he realizes he did it at that moment. The strangers show up and attempt to use their hand trick to put him to sleep, but John is immune. Then a stranger pulls out a knife and tries to attack him. However, the wooden platform breaks beneath him, and he falls. The other strangers are also armed, and they trigger John's power, which breaks more wood. Another stranger falls and gets stuck in some rope that chokes him. The first stranger flies back to the platform and attempts to use his knife, but John steps aside, causing him to fall into a hole too. He holds onto the rope, and the weight affects the sign's gears, causing part of it to fall and cut the stranger's head open. The resulting noise causes the last stranger to feel unbearable pain. When John climbs back up, he sees a gooey creature emerge from the dead stranger, and the noises it makes as it dies blow out the lights. John seizes the opportunity to run away quickly. Later, at the stranger's hideout, they discuss John's power. They state he's capable of tuning, and that something called imprinting didn't work. Daniel hasn't called them with any news, so they resolve to search for John themselves at home. Emma comes out of the shower and is shocked to find John waiting at the table. He doesn't remember her. He only came to this address because he read it in the hotel book, and the keys worked. Emma gives him Daniel's card before explaining that John left their home after discovering she was having an affair. John assures her he was with May and didn't experience any violent thoughts, so he doesn't believe he's the killer. When he looks out the window, he notices a police car and immediately runs away, but Frank appears in the corridor to arrest him. Emma pushes Frank to distract him, and John jumps to the lower floors to escape faster. As Frank jumps to chase him, John finds himself in a room with no exit. However, a door magically appears on the wall, allowing John to leave the building. When Frank arrives at the same room, the door is gone, but he finds Daniel's card on the ground afterward. John takes a cab and notices the driver has a souvenir from Shell Beach, so he asks how to get there. The driver appears confused because he cannot remember the beach's location, even though he's been there many times. The cab drops John at Daniel's building, and he watches Frank trying to interrogate the doctor, but Daniel doesn't provide any information. After Frank leaves, John begins to follow him. Moments later, Daniel is in the bathhouse when he is approached by a stranger, who shows him the syringe he found in John's room. Daniel explains he tried to imprint John, but John woke up and knocked the syringe from his hand before running away. He assures the stranger that John doesn't possess any memories, only glimpses, but the stranger is worried because John can tune, which indicates he has the same power as the strangers do. The man decides they won't imprint John, and they must capture him for another purpose. While they converse, John is sneaking around and hearing everything. He checks Daniel's suitcase and spots the syringes. On his way out, the stranger changes the location of the pool ladder, making Daniel swim more. Meanwhile, Frank visits Eddie, who keeps drawing spirals on the walls. Eddie went crazy after working on a very strange case, and now he spends his days riding the subway in circles. He claims he thinks in circles too and mentions that there's no way out. Memory problems are also part of his issues, not to mention he doesn't believe the woman in the house is his real wife and doubts the identity of everyone he knows. When Frank asks about the case, Eddie freaks out, asserting that there never was a case and that it's all a big joke. Moments later, John watches Daniel approach an old building, and a door appears for the doctor to enter, but John can't follow him anymore. Inside, the strangers are cataloging different objects, and Daniel uses them to create a serum that alters memories. Suddenly, the strangers make him float and demand to know why John wasn't asleep in the hotel. Daniel has no idea but theorizes that John is adapting and evolving. He blames this on the human soul, which the strangers are searching for. As midnight approaches, all the strangers gather in the middle of their hideout and wait for their large clock to strike 12. When it does, every person in the city instantly falls asleep, and every machine stops functioning, including cars and clocks. John is the only one awake and panics when he sees the world freeze. He tries to wake the people up, but nobody reacts. In the headquarters, the strangers announce it's time to tune and activate a machine that causes dozens of tall structures to emerge from the ground all over the city. Then John sees the strangers and Daniel exit the hideout with the bodies of sleeping humans, who are dropped at various buildings and receive serum injections into their foreheads. The building rooms change when these people receive the injection, granting them a new life. Some of them become wealthier, and others find new jobs. Even the children are affected by this. When Daniel is finished, John intercepts him on his way out and begins shaking him, demanding an explanation. Since Daniel refuses to answer, John becomes angry and accidentally activates his powers, sending Daniel flying. An impressed Daniel informs John that he possesses the tuning power that the strangers used to change the buildings. He offers to help him control it, but at that moment, the strangers emerge, forcing John to flee. In the headquarters, the clock is stored away, and the city awakens. Those who were injected now believe that the memories from the serum were their real lives all along. As he wakes, Frank notices there's a spiral in his coffee that looks exactly like John's fingerprint. The following night, Daniel creates a new serum containing John's memories, which should allow them to track his movements. Mr. Hand volunteers as a test subject, so he is secured to a device before Daniel injects him. Hand's body writhes as his brain becomes overwhelmed with John's memories, but he survives the encounter and is prepared to hunt. Afterward, they glide through the city and break into May's home to question her about John, brandishing a knife to compel her to speak. Meanwhile, John reads the back of the postcard and notices it is signed by someone named Carl Harris, whose name matches the initials on the suitcase. He searches for the name in the yellow pages and discovers an address, so he obtains directions from a newspaper stand and takes the subway. During the trip, he spots Shell Beach on the subway map and immediately switches lines to go there instead. However, no matter which subway he takes, he can't seem to find a way to reach the outer stations. Eddie is nearby and hears John speaking to a guard, so he points out there's no way to leave the city, as he knows from trying. He explains he used to be a cop, but the strangers enjoy swapping memories and professions among people. However, they aren't aware of this. Eddie remembers because he woke up in the middle of the process just like John did, and now he claims to have found a way out. John watches in shock as a train finishes the poor man. Moments later, the strangers track John's whereabouts to Emma's home. Mr. Hand finds her watching the river, and they engage in a philosophical discussion about how memories define humanity. After experiencing more visions of John's life with Emma, Hand departs. Remembering John's story, Emma visits May's apartment, where she discovers May dead, with spiral scars. She's about to flee when she is suddenly confronted by Frank, who now suspects her as well. They then find May's daughter hiding under the bed and a drawing depicting the stranger's arrival. Eventually, John locates Carl's address, which turns out to be an aquarium. Nobody responds when he calls out, so he breaks the front window to enter inside a dark room. He is confronted by Carl, who threatens him with a weapon but lowers it once he recognizes John. Carl is John's uncle and has many pictures from John's childhood, including images of his hometown, Shell Beach. John's family died when the house burned down, and Carl does not remember how to get to that place. John notices the pictures are bright and realizes the sun has never risen in the city. It's always dark. One of the pictures shows that John burned his arm in the fire, but he doesn't have a scar now, indicating everything is a lie. He still agrees to spend the night in his old room, where he finds a journal he wrote as a child about Shell Beach, but it is empty. Meanwhile, Carl secretly calls Emma to inform her where her husband is, but John overhears him and escapes through the window. Emma conveys the information to Frank, and they leave together to search for him, unaware that Hand is trailing them at that moment. Clocks strike 12, and everyone falls asleep. The strangers locate John and begin transforming the stairs he's on to try to stop him. John keeps running, reaching the roof and jumping from building to building as the city transforms around him. Suddenly, Mr. Hand blocks his path and tries to attack, but John punches him, knocking him down and seizing his knife. John threatens Hand to force him to talk and learns that the strangers have constructed the city using people's stolen memories from various time periods. Each night, they refine it to discern what makes people human, as the strangers desire to be like them. Hand then begins taunting John with his memories before revealing that the strangers are the gooey creatures John saw the other night, using dead human bodies as vessels. Attempting to choke John, the roof transforms unexpectedly, throwing them both off. John manages to grip a balcony while more strangers pursue him, and a building approaches. Desperate, John shatters a window and hides in the adjacent room before the two buildings collide, killing one of the strangers. The other stranger also enters and chases John through the corridors. John runs until he finds a door, which he opens with some struggle, only to nearly fall off the building. He clings to the edge, and the stranger bites his hand, causing it to bleed. Thankfully, a structure grows nearby, allowing John to jump onto it and escape through the roofs again. As the tuning time concludes and everyone awakens, John lands in an alley and is encircled by strangers. However, Frank and Emma arrive in a car and quickly take him away. Later, at the police station, Frank interrogates John, showing him pictures of the bodies and the Shell Beach book. To John's surprise, the pages now contain drawings. He points out the absence of sunlight and the fact that people lack memories, indicating something strange is happening, but Frank doesn't believe him. Next, John utilizes his power to make the book float, leaving Frank in shock. Afterward, John is allowed to speak to Emma and tells her he isn't angry about the affair anymore because the memories aren't real. He also asserts that their marriage isn't real either, yet Emma feels that her love for him is genuine. John uses his power to break the glass and kiss her, but the cops then take him away. Suddenly, the strangers burst into the station and render all the cops unconscious. They then force the captain to take them to John, but when they open the cell, he's already gone. Hand kills the captain to release his frustration at the bathhouse. John confronts Daniel again and gets him to talk. Daniel explains that the entire city is the strangers' experiment and that he hides there because they despise water. He also confirms that John isn't a murderer and offers to inject him again to reveal the rest of the truth. Abruptly, Frank appears and holds Daniel at gunpoint, revealing that he has released John so they could discover the truth together. The duo drags Daniel into Frank's car and begins driving toward Shell Beach, instructing the doctor to guide them there. When Daniel tries to refuse by saying there's nothing there, John tortures him with his power until he acquiesces. When they reach the river, they notice the bridge is missing. Daniel attempts to flee, so John kicks him down and declares they'll continue on a boat. Meanwhile, Emma enters her apartment and finds all her belongings gone, but the strangers are present, and Hand calls her Anna. Emma attempts to escape, but Hand blocks her path back on the boat. Daniel shares the story of what occurred. The strangers are aliens who abducted numerous humans and brought them to this dark city as an experiment. They mix and match memories to understand what makes humans unique and hopefully learn how to acquire soul. The strangers share a collective mind and are on the brink of extinction, so they believe human souls can save them. They are afraid of light, which is why it is always dark in their city. Daniel was compelled to cooperate because the aliens didn't know how to experiment with the human mind, owing to their lack of understanding. However, he was forced to erase his own memories, all the memories John has fabricated, and the drawings in the notebook were created recently by his powers. Eventually, they reach the outer walls and discover Shell Beach is merely a sign. Daniel insists there's nothing beyond the city, but Frank and John begin breaking down the wall anyway. They nearly fall through the resulting hole and are startled to see outer space on the other side, which verifies the alien story to the humans. At that moment, the strangers arrive with Emma, and Frank opens fire, killing a few of them. When a stranger tries to attack John, Frank engages him in combat, and they accidentally fall through the hole, floating away toward their deaths. John desires to continue fighting, but Hand threatens to kill Emma, forcing him to surrender and allowing Hand to put him to sleep. Moments later, John wakes up tied to a device in the stranger's hideout. The crowd desires his death, but the leader proclaims that the experiment is over and that John will be imprinted with the stranger's memories so they can share his soul. Daniel pretends to begin the process but instead injects a series of memories showing the doctor teaching John how to control the tuning and utilize his power to its full capacity. Suddenly, John opens his eyes and destroys the device with just a thought. He then uses his powers to repel the strangers and free Daniel from a device as well. Soon, the leader retaliates with his own powers, and a fight erupts. John and the stranger push against each other, destroying the room they occupy, causing the other strangers to flee in panic. The metal creates spikes and rising structures while the electricity starts shocking any stranger it can reach. John's and the leader's powers collide in the center of the room, causing the entire building to shake and begin to crumble. Strangers continue to fall to their deaths or get crushed by debris. When the roof and walls collapse, the strangers start floating into space too. Eventually, the powers explode into a beam of light, and the city above them begins to crumble as well. Daniel manages to escape as the giant flock rises from the ground, and John floats upward toward the sky. The leader does the same and throws a knife at John, who stops it with his power and hurls it back. It stabs the leader and sends him flying into a water tank that erupts. The alien emerges from the dead body and dissolves in the air afterward. John inquires about Emma, and Daniel explains she no longer exists because she was given new memories during the last tuning. The memory factory has been destroyed, so they can't bring her back either. John then uses his power to expel the water from the city and create an ocean around it. He also begins rebuilding the city as he announces he is going to Shell Beach. Meanwhile, Emma wakes up as Anna, an employee at the local theater. When her shift ends, she takes the bus to Shell Beach as well. Simultaneously, John is approached by Hand, but he ignores him and creates a shore near the ocean before making the sun rise. As the light burns Hand, John walks to the bridge on the shore and reunites with Emma. She doesn't recognize him but still invites him to take a walk on the beach.